All right, so what do I do? I'm a personal injury attorney. I represent people who are involved in accidents and help them get compensation for their injuries. I love what I do. What do I bring to the table? Well, I've been doing this for 40 years. Sounds like a long time, but when I look over there and I see Dr. Mark Yamamoto, who's been a dentist for over 50 years, it doesn't seem quite as long. In any event, over those 40 years plus, I've had a lot of experiences dealing with clients, dealing with insurance companies, dealing with defendants, and it's taught me a few things. One of the things that I've learned is that you can't help everybody. I work on what's called a contingent fee basis, so people don't pay me anything up front. I don't send them a bill every month, and I'm paid at the end of the case. So I get a percentage of the recovery, assuming that we're successful. And frankly, I don't want to take cases that I don't think have good merit, because I would be wasting my time and wasting my client's time. So some people come to me with cases that are not going to be something I can handle. If it's a smaller case, I can give them advice and counsel and often send them off to small claims court, where they can get a resolution quickly and inexpensively. They can get in within a few months at a cost of less than a couple $100. There is a limitation of $10,000, so if they have a large case, this may not be appropriate for them. But if it's a small case, they can get it taken care of fairly quickly and inexpensively. Attorneys don't practice in small claims, except that if there's an appeal from small claims, both sides can be represented by counsel. But otherwise, attorneys don't practice in the small claims courts. The cost of pursuing personal injury in any litigation case is going up. It's more expensive than it used to be to pay the filing fee to the court, to have the process served, the summons and complaint. We're even paying for things that the courts used to provide before. If you want a court reporter, and you definitely want a court reporter in trial to keep a record for appeal, you have to pay for that. The courts used to provide court reporters. We don't have that anymore.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's like a basic service.
Yeah, everyone's like, what?
What?
That's true.
Tax dollars at work.
We have lost courthouses. We're starting to reopen a few, but during the financial crisis, actual courthouses were shut down. The judges, of course, kept their jobs, but we lost a lot of support personnel. And so it's difficult these days to get cases into trial, not only because of the expenses and time involved in doing it, but because the courtrooms are not as available as they used to be. So cases can take longer. Now, when I first started practicing many, many years ago, there were cases that were running up against the 5-year statute. You have to get a case tried within 5 years after you file the lawsuit. And there were cases, especially up in LA County, where they were running right up into the statute, and it was causing a lot of trouble. Well, over the years, that problem, for the most part, went away. And for a long time, we were able to get into trial within a year and a half. And that was really good. It helped the parties get their cases resolved without as much delay. It can still take a long time. I was just recently involved in a case that went for 4 years. So it can still happen. But for the most part, you can now get to trial in a year and a half or 2 years in most of the courts. So that's a good thing. We're not up against the 5-year statute the way we used to be. But it's still very expensive. And one of the things that I talk to clients about when we're resolving cases is, how much can we expect to get if we try the case? How much is it going to cost us to get there versus what the insurance company is offering today? And we have to bottom line it. If it works better for the client to accept a settlement at this point and avoid payment of a lot of expenses, we do that. On the other hand, some cases need to be tried. If you've got a $100,000 case and the insurance company is offering you $10,000 for whatever reason, you don't have a lot of choice. You've got to take that case forward. And you do have the opportunity to get your costs back, not your attorney's fees, but at least your court costs back if you're successful in the case. So insurance companies don't frequently agree with us on values. They look at it from a different perspective. And I've had the experience of working for insurance companies as a claims adjuster before I became an attorney. And I have an understanding of how they view cases. Their expectation is that most cases are at the very least inflated and possibly fraudulent. And they come at the cases with this mindset. And so what we need to do is present them with enough evidence that it overcomes their initial impression of the case. If we can demonstrate that the case is real, the client is real, and the losses are real, and that we have the evidence and the experts to back it up and prove it, they tend to come around. Unfortunately, they tend to come around just before trial. And so you've spent an awful lot of money and time preparing the case to get it ready to go to trial before they're willing to really acknowledge it. Now, I'm not always right. I mean, my perspective is what it is, and sometimes they're right. Sometimes the case is not worth what I think it's worth. But with the years of practice that I have and the experience that I've had, I think I'm pretty good at developing values on cases and knowing how to counsel my clients and make recommendations that are appropriate in their case. So one other thing I wanted to discuss with you briefly today is the practice of law is changing. We have about 200,000 lawyers in California. Most lawyers in California practice in either solo or small law firms, and they're business people. Some lawyers practice with big firms. They go across the country or international, and they might have thousands of attorneys. But most of us operate a business and are subject to all the same things that you do in your businesses, all the rules and regulations that we need to comply with. There are changes afoot. The State Bar is gathering information and I think pushing to allow a different level of practice of law, something involving legal technicians, people who don't have a law degree, people who have some limited legal education. And the interesting thing about it is they're promoting these people to practice independently. Now, we currently have legal secretaries, paralegals, and other assistants that perform under the supervision of an attorney. And that's fine. They do a fantastic job. But they do have supervision of an attorney. If these people are allowed to practice independently, that supervision will be gone. So I don't know how that's going to benefit the public. I know there's a problem right now with access to legal services, and there are people who say they can't afford to pay lawyers to handle their matters. If you go into court for divorces, better than half of the people there are not represented by counsel. And so there is a need for legal representation. I just don't think this is the answer. I think we need to do something to increase the number of attorneys or to increase the access to attorneys that we currently have that still provides that the advice and counsel that you're getting is from someone who has a legal education. So, any questions? Yes.
So, what's your impression of the insurance company's willingness to pay in like a historical sense? Like, are we at a nadir, or are we someplace in the middle, or have there been times in the past when they were more willing to pay?
It has varied a lot over the years, and it depends on the insurance company and actually on the individual adjuster and their supervisor, how they evaluate claims. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I've seen certain companies go through different cycles of whether they want to pay or not. Sometimes they get a backlog of cases and they say, people, we've got to get rid of these things. If you have to pay a little bit more, okay, just get rid of these claims. We've got too many. Let's close them out before the end of the year. Other times you'll get new management in who says, look, we're paying too much money on these claims. You people are not doing your job, and nobody gets any money to pay these claims, or not enough to settle them. And so the adjusters just keep gathering more and more cases. These adjusters are hardworking people, and they might have a couple hundred cases at a time. And so they get new ones every week, and they have to try to resolve the old ones if they can. But I've seen this cycle go on over and over again, where an insurance company will be just absolutely impossible to deal with for a period of time until they change their mind and decide, we've got to get rid of some of these claims. Same thing happens with counsel. They'll have inside counsel, and they'll have counsel outside of the firm, and they go through the same cycles. They'll have the inside counsel handling everything until they say, this is costing us too much, and they'll hire outside counsel, then they'll say, well, outside counsel's costing us too much, so let's bring it in-house again. So it goes through a lot of cycles.
Right. And so those would probably go like opposite of the business cycle. I mean, in a theoretical sense, it would behoove them to be tight when things were fat and opposite.
Well, if there's a logic to it, it escapes me.
Fair enough, fair
That's
enough.
just been my experience, okay? Anything else? Yes.
What does a carpet porter cost?
About $2,000 a day.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's a couple thousand dollars.
$2,000 a day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Price of paint just went up, didn't it?
well, if you want to see some high expenses, hire an orthopedic surgeon. They want $5,000 for a half a day, $10,000 for a day to testify in court.
Yep.
And if you can't get them in on the day that you want them because the judge says he's got other things to take care of, you got to come back in 2 days, you're paying for another $5,000 to $10,000 to get the doctor out there again. Wow. So that's what drives up the costs of handling these cases. You have these expert witnesses, whether it's engineers or accountants or physicians or whomever, that you have to bring in to testify, and both sides have this problem. So it's very expensive to litigate cases. Mark will tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.